Relationships are the hardest. There's no question about that. It's a lot easier to change other habits. It's a lot easier to introduce new rituals than it is to address the question of relationships. And let me tell you straight out that, sort of what I know about relationships. What do I know about relationships? We could write what I know about relationships on the back of a postage stamp. Now, I would prefer if the postage stamp that you use is the recovery, is the, I beg your pardon, the forever postage stamp. On the back of that, you can write what I know about relationships. That forever stamp that comes out on Valentine's Day, you know the one I mean, that says love. That's the one. The back of that is where you write what I know about relationships. There's a very great piece of advice that I've cherished since I heard it first because it really spoke to me. First, get a plant. A house plant. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, but a plant. Not fresh cut flowers because they're already dying, but an actual plant. Get a healthy plant and hang on to that plant. Nurture it, feed it, water it, give it some sunlight, speak to it if you wish. And if you cannot kill that plant within the first year of living with it, you're ready for a pet. Could be a 4-footed pet, like a self-contained cat or a loving puppy. Could be a bird, whatever, a pet. And if you can manage to keep that pet fed and watered and looked after and walked and happy and be happy with your pet for a year, then you're ready to start thinking about relationships. Now, does anybody follow that precept? Of course not. I have yet to meet a house plant I couldn't kill. I really have no idea how to nurture house plants, and I've never, ever, ever lived with a pet. But, in my youthful exuberance, let's call it, arrogance would be another word, I did think that I could do relationships. Now, in my drinking years, I did not see any pink elephants. I'm very grateful for that. I didn't see pink elephants. But I did see relationships that didn't exist, that never existed. And these include relationships with men whom I mischaracterized as lovers. They weren't individuals who loved me. They liked me, in fairness to them. They weren't creeps, but they didn't love me. I had other myths going on in my mind about them. And I had to face up to that, the fact that those relationships, those pink elephant style relationships, I had to disengage from the myths that I had created around them before I could think about having healthy relationships in my life moving forward. Now, that emotional detox was very disillusioning, and yes, it was very painful. I made a list, to begin, I made a list of the men in my life since forever. And of course, big surprise, they all turned out to be my father, versions of my father. And then I inventoried those relationships against my values, not the values that I necessarily could articulate at the time, because this isn't a blame game. This is a reality check. And I found all of those relationships wanting to greater or to lesser extent. And again, not the fault of the man involved. The common denominator here was me. And many of these men are still friends, and I cherish them as friends. But these were not relationships. When we talk about healthy relationships, they were something else, a divertissement. The question here was, what was I thinking? Not what were they doing, because I was never abused. The question is, what was I doing? And I had to start paying attention to that, and to start thinking about how my relationships, all my relationships, have to become more aligned with my values moving forward. And that's a challenge. I don't doubt that that's a challenge. I start by paying attention to who shows up, not quite so much attention to who I'm inviting into my life or trying to galvanize into my life, but who actually shows up, who volunteers to be in my life, and who stays, sort of having seen beyond the coming attraction, sort of the trailer uh, piece, who stays, and how bi-directional is the relationship. Is the energy flowing positively and openly in both directions? So that's what I know about healthy relationships, and you can fit it on the back of a Forever Love stamp.